Well, thank you all for joining us this afternoon. Like John said, this is our first ever roundtable. I'm Melanie, I'm the membership director. So for a lot of you, this is the first time seeing me. Hi. I wanted to take a moment to begin to thank you so much for all of your continued support of our high quality journalism that is truly vital to our community, especially at this moment. And additionally, I wanted to share that we've been working on relaunching our Out of This World membership program with new levels and some new benefits, including exclusive content and invites to programming such as this. And we're truly committed to building a community through membership and discovering new ways, especially given the current circumstances, to connect everyone virtually. Again, so bear with us. This is our first attempt. I assure you it will not be our last. In a moment, I'm gonna send a poll. It's gonna appear on your screen. Once you share your response, the poll will disappear and the results will be shared throughout this roundtable. So I'm gonna launch that poll right now. It'll go away once you take the poll though. All right, and then just a few ground rules. Remove the poll off my screen. Just a few ground rules. As you have come into the roundtable, you'll notice like your audio and your camera is automatically off. And most of that is just so that you can hear the panelists well. And questions are encouraged throughout the roundtable. Just as a side note, we have left plenty of time at the end for a Q&A. But if you should have questions during this first part, please just chat me directly. That's Melanie. And then if you have questions during the Q&A part, use your little hand raising feature. I hope I didn't lose my fingers in that. Use your little hand raising feature and I will let you know when you're next. And then your microphone and camera may come on automatically depending on your permission setting in Zoom. And if you want to only opt for audio, just let me know when you chat me directly so that I can set it to audio only. And then again, please bear with us. There's a lot more of you than there are of me, so I promise we'll get to as many questions as possible as time permits. And with that, I turn it over to John.
Great, thanks Melanie, and thanks to everyone joining out there for this first virtual roundtable that we're hosting exclusively for our GeekWire members. We're excited to give this a try and see where it goes, and we've got a great panel discussion here today to talk about how we're coping with the COVID-19 pandemic as companies and organizations, really focusing on HR issues and also leadership issues. And I know we're all kind of in hyperspeed as we go through multiple issues for our companies. I was talking to a client today and just saying everything's hitting at once. We're reinventing our business models. We're dealing with every type of HR issue imaginable. And you have to do this in the span of hours. So it's really, in some ways it's scary, but and also times kind of reminding me of when we started GeekWire, kind of invigorating to try to rethink how we can position our companies right now. So I'm excited to kick this off and really thrilled that we have a great group of panelists, some of whom are GeekWire members themselves, joining us here today. And so I wanted to I'll go around and introduce our panel. And then we'll jump into the discussion. So first off, we have Mikaela Kiner, who's the CEO of Reverb, one of the leading HR consulting companies in the Seattle area, and works with probably many of the companies and organizations already on this conference. We have Britt, Provost, longtime HR leader here in the Seattle area, who's now the Chief People Officer at Accolade. Also doing some very interesting things in the telehealth and health space. So that's an interesting area of discussion. Karl Siebrecht, the co-founder and CEO of Flexe. Karl has a very interesting background. We'll get into that here in a little bit. Flexe is doing interesting activities in the shipping, logistics, and supply chain world right now in terms of a marketplace for warehouses. And so that obviously is very interesting work right now. And then we have Kim Vu, who leads the diversity and inclusion efforts at Remitly, the fast-growing unicorn money transfer company based here in Seattle. So welcome to all of you for joining us. As I mentioned, and I actually put in the chat for the full group, there's a podcast I've been listening to that I can't recommend enough for anybody who's dealing with the current crisis and thinking about how we lead through these tough times. And it's a Harvard Business Review podcast about leadership and lessons from Sir Ernest Shackleton, who was famously stuck in the ice for a couple years down off the coast of Antarctica, and how he led his team through that period. And just some great stuff in there. One of the lessons, of course, being make sure you have adequate food supply for the entire voyage. And I think that is an important thing we'll touch on today as well. Food supply obviously being that runway and cash to make it through this period. But as we kick off, I guess I just want to open it up for the entire group to jump in here. It's been about 2-3 weeks now since we've gone to this really intense work from home scenario. And so I want to just toss it out to the panel. What's working, what's not working for your companies in terms of this new work from home scenario? And anyone can field that. Go ahead, Mikaela, jump in.
Yeah, I'll start. A couple of quick thoughts. Something that's working well for us is doing multiple stand-ups each week. So we already have a couple standing meetings that we've continued on, our staff meeting and our kind of client review meeting, but we've added a couple of stand-ups and just making sure that we're connecting and seeing faces just like this, but also really taking time to go around and check in with each individual before diving into business and just understand, you know, how are people doing? How are people feeling? Of course, with the pace of the news cycle, that's different every day. I think, you know, for us, what's been challenging, and I'm sure others as well, is some of us have kids. You know, I have 2 teenagers. Our COO has a 3-year-old. And so different age of kids presents really different challenges when everybody's at home, kids are home, some have online school, some don't have online school. And just recognizing too the impact that that has on us. And it's not just that, oh, we're home and we're, you know, working 40 hours a week, but there's a lot more interruption, a lot more distraction, and a lot more people who need our time.
Got it. Yeah, jump on in, Britt.
Yeah, I was going to kind of continue on this. One of our new rules is not to say sorry. Sorry for when kids are on the screen, when pets are in the room, when people are taking breaks in the afternoon to check on their parents to make sure they're okay. And to be honest, for some people that just need to take a little bit of a break. You know, our business is focused on, like John said, we're talking to people right now about their healthcare, and you know, we work for employers to help people talk about their experiences and be their advocate. And so we're talking to a lot of people that are under a lot of pressure right now. And so making sure that we're our best selves as we go through that. I think it's changing the way that work is happening because we are thinking about the whole human and the family in a different way, partly because they can be on screen and be in this. And I guess the biggest advice that I'm giving that's maybe what's working, but also what we're worried about is the self-care. We're headed into this moment where we're sort of on this ocean, right? And there are waves coming through, and the waves that we've been experiencing, at least I've seen from our business right now, are about anxiety. People are watching the news, people are hearing what's going on here locally in Seattle and in other places where we do business. And we're starting to move into places about grief, right? So people have given up graduations and trips and connections with their family. They may be in different places. And so I think just being really super sympathetic to understanding what that is right now for people, and everybody's at a different place. Do I think we've got it perfectly sorted? I don't, but we're working through it and we're trying our best to be flexible.
Yeah, and I would jump in there just to add to what Mikaela and both Britt had mentioned too. I think communication right now is one of the areas that we've really leaned in on to over communicate and really lean into that and recognize that things aren't normal, so we don't necessarily have to act or be normal right now, right? And so really making sure that we're finding different ways to talk to one another, to communicate, leverage all those channels that we have available within the organization to do that, and making sure that we're not just, you know, like what Mikaela had shared, like not just checking in about the business, but checking in about the individual and how they're doing, and making sure that happens first before we do anything else. And then to the other piece about the grief piece that Britt brought up, I think is like starting to have conversations, being really mindful about how we're communicating to each other and what language we use, because I think in a tech culture where data is really highly valued, and the sharing of data and communication around COVID may be at a point where we're going into, our peak in this country around seeing people get sick, people who maybe, have passed away or may be dying, and being really, really sensitive to that and practicing compassion. And ensuring and thinking about the language that we're using across the organization, that it's not just about the numbers, but also about the lives that are being impacted as well.
Yeah, I think really well said by all three of you. I couldn't agree more. I mean, the first and most important thing is communication. And in the world we're in now, we need to adapt what that means, partly through Zoom, in the physical medium of communications, but also with the tone, the messaging as well. So as I think about what has worked and what hasn't worked with us, pretty much everything that comes to mind sort of branches off that core theme of communication. We have been Zoom users for a while, have maybe 10% of our staff are remote. So we were kind of used to that infrastructure at some level, but what people based in Seattle weren't as used to is even as tactically as hey, let's use video, not just audio, let's use video. And so we don't mandate that, but strongly encourage it because it helps build community at some level. It helps with communication when you can see people's reactions, and it helps build relationships. So that's one of the things we strongly encourage. And then just finding ways to create new opportunities for interaction. So we have stand-up, we have our typical sort of operating rhythm of meetings, and then to that we've added, somebody on our team came up with a great idea to do virtual lunches. And so there's kind of way that people can opt in to join a team of other people having lunch together. We've done virtual happy hours. We're doing, again, somebody else had a great idea of let's do kind of small group coffee conversations, just so it's a chance that everybody in the organization can get kind of commingled with people they wouldn't typically interact with. It's more like a hallway conversation. So you mix people up, create new relationships, and then also hopefully create a space for somebody to ask a question or hear a point of view that they wouldn't otherwise hear from sitting in their home or wherever they may be.
Yeah, there was a company I was talking to this week, Blink Interactive. They do UX design, and they were doing something interesting with Zoom where they were just keeping a constant Zoom room open for anybody that just wanted to pop in and say hi, kind of that water cooler concept. So that was an interesting idea, to have it always running for somebody to jump in and communicate if they needed to. So
John, we're thinking about that. We're thinking about a meditation room that we always have open, that's in Zoom, that has, anyway, we haven't figured it out yet.
How will that work? Wouldn't you want to just be solo?
Well, we wanted to have some kind of background and wave sounds and everything else. So this is our new idea. I'll let you know how it turns out.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, Britt, you and Kim both have pretty distributed workforces already. So maybe you already have some lessons from what you learned from how those workforces were set up. Any tips or tricks for those that are maybe new to this?
Yeah, I would say so. We do have a relatively distributed team across the globe, but a lot of our teams are actually very much centered around an office space. So we've definitely had to learn how to pivot and move everybody into a work from home environment, because our culture itself wasn't really built around work from home environments. But it's really helped us, because we were a distributed organization from an office perspective. It's really helped us actually feel even more connected to our other offices, because everybody's experiencing the same thing at the same time. And so there's been very kind of learning as you're going, of a lot of great shared resources that are happening between our managers, our teams. We're learning a lot from our folks who were already working remotely, and they've been leading and leaning in on helping us guide conversations for our teammates who have not been as familiar with being in a work from home environment. So there's just been a lot of organic sharing that's been happening. A lot more Slack channels have been created since then, and we've opened up new docs to really start to capture our learnings in the moment, because I think there's, while we're in it and we're trying to work through it, there's a lot of how can we capture the learnings that we're having right now, so that when we're back into the world of the new normal, what is that new workforce structure going to look like? What does that new environment for working look like for everyone? And so we're really trying to be mindful about how do we capture those learnings along the way.
Yeah, I guess I'd add to it. So we're here in Seattle, we're Arizona, Pennsylvania, and the Czech Republic. And so over the course of the last 3 weeks, and pretty advanced to where some of the states shut down, we started doing work from home tests. And so I think that was really effective for us, because we would kind of do waves in the different offices to get folks used to it, get them comfortable with what was going on, and actually, to be honest, to test our infrastructure to make sure that we could kind of accommodate what we were doing. Obviously, we're all using Zoom now. We're all using Slack. That was something we had kind of in the past. One of the things that made me also really impressed is, you know, to make sure everybody was stabilized, we sent a lot of things to people. So we sent peripherals and screens and other things. We didn't want people, because of the risk and kind of where people were feeling about things, to have to be in the office haggling over whether or not they could get their monitor in their car or whatever it was. So we had a really kind of thoughtful effort to make sure we got everything to everybody so that they could kind of continue to do their job, and checking in on them on that. We are doing all the things that you guys are talking about, whether it's, you know, regular daily stand-ups and other things, just to check in and see how people are doing. So far, so good. I think one of the biggest challenges I think we all have is childcare. And particularly given a lot of our folks are customer facing, you know, we've thought about how do we do assignments so they can do digital work where they can be interrupted by kids, or how do we do shift differentials that are a little different that may actually work for our customers better, that are after hours, so that they can get support and make sure things are going on with kiddos or family members or whatever. So it's this idea of being flexible and that actually kind of being really adaptive to who the individual is and what they need, so that we can continue to serve our customers and members, but also, you know, do right by the people that work for us.
Great. You know, Karl, you've got a pretty interesting background that I referenced in the intro. You're a Navy diver, so a military experience. You were the president of Atlas, which was part of the Aquantive online advertising juggernaut during the dot-com boom and then bust. And I'm just curious if you have any sort of leadership lessons for folks based on those experiences, kind of managing during crisis.
Yeah, interesting, I guess. That's true. I mean, I would come back to, I think one of the most important, if not the most important principle that I fall back on is communication, which I've already sort of talked about, so I won't repeat myself there, but I just can't emphasize enough the importance of, if you think you're communicating enough, you're probably halfway home to what's needed. You know, that was true from my military experience. You know, frankly, you mentioned Aquantive. You know, the super short version of a story there was, you know, that company went public on Leap Day in 2000, and the NASDAQ dropped like 13 days later or something. So, you know, massive economic fallout. And fortunately for that company, it had raised capital just before the crisis. But we had a really strong and experienced leadership team there that communicated well and also did a lot of early contingency planning. So that company ended up ultimately thriving, rebuilt into a really great company. But a lot of that was because the leadership team there took kind of clear, decisive action early. And communicated very clearly and frequently with everybody, so that, you know, we went through a lot of hard times, but people came out of that still feeling really well tethered and tied to the culture, feeling very positive about the company. So those are lessons, you know, that I learned, you know, sort of on the job there, that certainly stay with me today. You know, I'm excited, John, to listen to the Shackleton
You'll love it.
podcast.
It's really good.
Well, I read the book, which is one of my favorites. So I'm going to listen to that. I'll offer to the group another little resource. Trevor Noah has this great thing that I saw a week or so ago. It was actually I have 3 daughters. My oldest one was like, "Hey, Dad, check this out." And so I'm sure you can find it on YouTube. He talks about leadership, and he says, I think of it this way. So airline pilots, he's like, when you're on a flight and the pilot comes on and says, "Hey, everybody, looks like things are going to get bumpy. There's some turbulence up ahead. So we're gonna shut down meal service, and we're gonna ask everyone to stay in their seats, and we're gonna do our best to find the right altitude, but it's gonna get bumpy, and we'll keep you informed." And he does it way funnier than I ever could, but he comes, and then when the bumps start, you're like, "Oh yeah, that's what he was talking about." You're sort of prepared for it. He says, compare that to, you're flying along and all of a sudden bumps start going crazy and no one's saying anything. Come on, and like, "Oh, bumps, yeah, don't really worry about that. Everything's fine." And just the difference in those two ways of approaching something, I think captures it really, really well. And of course, he does it with a brilliant sense of humor. 2 minutes. So if you find that, you should.
Holly Grambler, our great sales and marketing chief, is going to do some research for any links you throw out that. She'll post it in the chat for everybody who's listening. So we'll get that in there. On that communication front, and this is a question for the entire group. This is something that, I think we're all struggling with because this is such a unique situation and we don't know a lot of the answers. How do you manage your communication between transparency about what's going on and kind of keeping that positive outlook on the horizon, which is kind of one of the lessons from the Shackleton episode that folks will listen to? I mean, that seems like a real challenge for companies right now, being transparent about where things are at and honest, and yet still trying to be a leader to put a positive outlook on where we could be going. So how are you all managing that?
Yeah. I mean, I'll start by saying, because I've had this conversation with a lot of leaders recently, and just the reminder that transparency, like I believe in transparency, it's a great value. It doesn't mean being 100% transparent about all things at all times. So we still get to use judgment and discretion. And one way I think of that is, sort of who's your audience, and is what you're sharing going to be helpful, and also who has kind of the means and maturity to deal with different messages at different levels. So that's just something to think about, right? And if you think about this in larger organizations, we usually communicate certain things at an executive level, and then HR and managers, become privy to certain information sooner, and then really help cascade that throughout the organization. So I think it's great to look at your team in that way and come up with a plan. I think right now the frequency of communication and also letting people know what to expect, as you were just saying. But for instance, if, hey, every 2 weeks at a minimum, we're going to update our message. I know right now it might be a lot faster than that, but always remembering to circle back and not leave people hanging is something that's really important. As far as the optimism, and I'm sure others have great ideas for this too, but as a few people already mentioned, there are some silver linings, some things that we're learning, and kind of new ways of work that are coming out of this. I also think it's important to remember that if you are optimistic about your business or parts of your business coming out okay, if people are going to have job security, it is really important to communicate that. I know we focus a lot on communicating the hard news and the bad news, but I'm reminded to say, a couple of people on our staff really know where we stand financially, but the whole staff doesn't know that. And so a couple of days have gone by before I realized I need to let people know that we're okay for the time being. That's an important message too.
I'd add on, there are a couple things we're trying to do that are maybe, the virtual happy hours are important because those may not be the sort, so our CEO, our head of products, other really super senior leaders kind of just hang out with us and we have conversation. And some of that going back to normalcy, I think has been really super important. Yeah, there's some messages that get snuck in around the edges in terms of how things are going and that kind of thing, but having them visible and human you know, wives join, kids join, all that kind of stuff. We're trying to think about how to do coffee meetings and other things.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't have to be, to Michaela's point, every single detail about what's going on in the business, but it is the fact that they're there, they're visible, you can see them. And if you really do have a question, you can ask. I think the other thing that, you know, our leaders have done well, and I think it's just part of their philosophy, is they've really leaned into community. So I know our leadership's been taking a pretty active role in Seattle and some other things to help support us. And I think setting that tone that we live here, we belong, we're going to take care of this community, has also, I think, really calmed a lot of the edges around the organization. We're trying to figure out how to do that in Arizona and Pennsylvania and the Czech Republic where we operate. But that sets a tone too, that we're here and we're going to continue to be here, and we're going to do good things for the people that live here.
Yeah, and I would add to that too. I think in terms of leaning into community, we've also been leaning into how we support our customers. So also just thinking about, we haven't let up on those practices around making sure that we're communicating and connecting with our customers by still reaching out to them and saying, like, what are the changing, like, what's the changing environment for our customers and what are their needs right now outside of our product, so that we can really understand like what's going to be the best case use for how we can serve our customers during this time. So really getting a pulse for what are the issues around unemployment for low wage workers, what are some of the issues that they may be facing in terms of access to the immigration courts right now. You know, so there's lots of things that are relevant to our business, and just hearing what kind of the real life challenges that our customers are having so that we can pivot accordingly and prioritize, I think has been really important to have those conversations with our customers, and then relaying that in the both formal and informal conversations that we're having with our teammates and with leaders. And I think to add to that visibility of our leadership team, our leadership team too has been doing a lot of the practices that have been shared here in terms of just making themselves available. Matt has been really great about doing weekly fireside chats, also doing breakfasts, lunches, and happy hours, really informally, just basically to listen and ask questions. I think that is part of the communication piece, is not just the delivery of information. I think it's also making sure that those channels are open for questions and concerns. And I think for a lot of folks, it's not even just a matter of they're expecting you to have an answer. They just want to be heard and acknowledge that there are anxieties and fears that people are having, and that they're being seen, and that they're valued, and that we'll get through it together.
Yeah, great advice. Just switching gears for a moment, what are you seeing on the hiring, recruiting front? Is that frozen? Are you onboarding new employees? What's that process been like? And this will kind of tie into what we're seeing going forward for the economy too, which I have a couple questions on that as well.
I can add to that. I mean, we're taking a pause largely on a lot of our positions because we're trying to be thoughtful about how we bring somebody into a new organization. There are positions we're hiring. There's some senior folks that are actually starting over the next couple weeks. So that's going to be super interesting how we're adapting our onboarding to bring those folks on. The biggest decision I don't have a final decision on, but we're trying to do our best on, is interns. A lot of organizations have internship programs. We think we have an interesting proposal to do something virtual. And so fingers crossed, we'll kind of take that forward. I think I have strong support from my leadership to make it happen. But it's those things too that are also really important. We've got a lot of organizations that have internship programs, and how are they going to do it this year? So that's us.
On the hiring front and recruiting front?
Well, we're hiring. We've got a couple positions that we're focused on, and we're going to keep going. And then as that continues to kind of work through, we'll figure out where we are.
Yeah, so we're still hiring. So we've basically moved the entire process to virtual. Early on, we had shifted our in-person interview processes into the virtual space in order to continue to be able to do that. We've now shifted our new hire orientations online as well. And so we've shifted that part of it to be able to bring in still the same speakers and folks to be able to connect with all of our new teammates, which has been really great to be able to still be able to do that. I think the part that we've had to make sure that we over-index on, though, is because they don't have that in-person, daily, kind of face-to-face interaction to build out that networking community internally. We're just making sure that they know when all the office hours are, for instance, like in my case for DEI, that they know when those are, they're on their calendar so they can call in, so they can get a chance to plug in and get to meet other people more informally, making sure that they're plugged into all the different Slack channels that are social based, so that they can start to get a sense of like who else may have shared similar interests in activities that they may have, so that they can engage and connect with other folks. And we've done like public welcomes on Slack and within our meetings to welcome those new folks on, and making sure that we're like doing personal outreach to them and really kind of making sure that we're touching base with them so they don't feel like they're out on an island as a new teammate. So not the most ideal, right? But we're making it work.
Yeah, great. Mikaela, did you want to jump in there?
Yeah, I'm trying to apologize for the fact that my cats are knocking at the door and coming in and out repeatedly. So you may
need
see
a dog, Mikaela, just to, he's just asleep on the couch back there.
I
So.
can't apologize for your pets, Mikaela. It's part of the deal now.
I'm not. They're being very rowdy. Yeah, I mean, we work with multiple companies, and what we're seeing is select companies, select industries that are still that are either seeing growth because of these changes or still able to grow, are hiring and figuring out how to both hire and onboard remotely. But I'd say a number of our clients are also more significantly impacted, where they're putting positions on hold. They're really stopping the process and just kind of reevaluating what's going on today. And we'll talk about this, looking more at solutions of how do we keep everybody, even if business is down and revenue is down.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know we're going to open it up here in a moment to Q&A from all the members and make it more of that town hall style. And just a reminder, Melanie, I think, had a poll question for everybody. If everyone wants to take that related to your concerns in business planning, that kind of ties into our to my next question, and maybe best for Karl on this. And also, if you have questions, make sure you're queuing those up with Melanie as well, and we can turn to those quickly. But Karl, how are you trying to do any sort of logical business planning for the next 2 or 3 quarters based on what's happening? And I know your business might be unique, that you're perhaps one of the ones that might be benefiting from this, but like so much is in flux. How are you even trying to plan for what's ahead?
Yeah, it's a great question, and there's not an easy answer at all. I mean, the first sort of obvious thing is to recognize how much uncertainty there is, and then figure out how to adjust your planning process. I mean, at a very, very tactical level, one of the things we've done is we've said, hey, we have our base case plan for the year, and we put a lot of work into that plan, and we continue to update our forecast every month. That's our operating rhythm. And when we built that plan, we had an upside case, we had a downside case, and a lot of the assumptions and that drove those two things. Well, guess we visited that, and we don't know what the right answer is, because as you kind of alluded to, in our particular business, we're seeing a broad range of hand of inbound new business because people have new needs that we can help them with. Sort of our business model, fast and be very flexible. And companies that have been, retailers that have been dramatically impacted, their sales go almost to zero for products in certain categories. So we're seeing both. And so it's kind of that net out. And because there's uncertainty around that, we just have to effectively be thoughtful about what are our contingency plans. So of course, we get our expense. The first that became really obvious for us is we're going to be spending a lot less on travel for months. In the nature of our business, we're in B2B enterprise sales, so we invest a lot in traveling around the country and getting in front of customers and prospects. And we're not doing any of that, obviously. The last anybody took was a couple of weeks ago, and that ends up being a really big line item on our P&L. That's an area where we can hedge back risk very naturally, disrupting anything new that hasn't already been disrupted. The takeaway is, hey, there just is a lot of uncertainty. So what are we going to do about it? It's basically kind of go back to your assumptions and probably put a wider range of outcomes around each of those assumptions and see what the implication is on your business plan. And then look for opportunities to create optionality. You know, if there's money that you were going to spend next week that you could delay, 4 weeks, there's a lot of optionality in that, particularly if it doesn't have a full impact on whatever you were spending it for to grow faster or what have you.
Yeah, are there specific things that you have looked at there that, other than business travel, obviously, that where you could delay that expense line to try to build a little bit more of a runway?
Yeah, I mean, so market is another thing. And again, I'm not the only person that has said this, and you could read the Black Swan memo, other things out there. Look at the discretionary buckets of spend that are the largest buckets. Go there first, and try to do the over under analysis on, hey, if I stop this spend or readjust it down, what is the impact? That's been our approach, and we found a number of areas where it's clear that the right answer is, hey, let's hit pause on just until we get more information over the next week, the next month, about how this thing is trending, and like I said earlier, how it's impacting our business. Like, the puts and takes, where are we netting out in terms of our specific business?
Got it. And Mikaela, how about you in terms of what you're hearing from companies as they're planning their contingency plans? How are you guiding companies to help with that, just providing advice and support on that, as they might have to make tough decisions in the next few weeks or months?
Yeah, they do. And just on the spending front too, I mean, one of the things that we do is has been a lot of live training and in-person workshops. And obviously all of those are canceled or postponed until further notice, which makes sense, right? On one hand, people are just immersed in dealing with their own responses and don't have the headspace for some of that stuff. And then of course we aren't able to be on site. We do see people looking at virtual options as they regroup and figure out what's going on with their business. The hardest questions we're getting, of course, are about people and staffing costs. And one thing I'm always grateful for this community is that every conversation we've had about this, whether it's with business leaders, people leaders, or even employment attorneys, is that they are coming at it with a lot of compassion. And so the first question we see people asking is, are there ways to reduce staff costs without having to lay people off? Which there are potentially some creative solutions. One is salary reduction. So if you do have salaried employees and you can reduce salaries across the board, that's one way to give yourself a bit more runway. Another, and I know people have been trying to understand, what is a furlough and how is a furlough different from a layoff? So if you have a group of people who aren't needed now, but you're optimistic that you might need them soon, let's say you think in 6 or 8 weeks, you're going to pivot your business or things might turn around, you can furlough them. And when you furlough somebody, they're still your employee, they're still on your payroll. They can use any accrued time off to pay for their time, and then they can apply for unemployment. But also, depending on your benefits plan, they may be eligible to continue on your benefits. So there are a lot of potential advantages to the idea of doing a furlough. So that's what we've been talking to people about right now. Of course, some folks will have to do actual reductions and layoffs, in which case we want to think about how much notice can you give people. Can you give them severance? Can you pay for their continuation of benefits for a period of time? What are all of the things you can do really to support them as best you can?
Great. Well, I think we might turn it over here to some Q&A from the audience. Melanie, I'll turn it to you. Do we have any questions that have come in?
yes. Someone wanted to know if we could do another one of these sessions in about 2 or 3 weeks when COVID-19 situation has progressed.
I think the answer is yes. I think we might be doing a lot of these sessions.
I'm in.
The interesting thing, tonight we were supposed to be hosting the GeekWire Awards at Mopop, just to give you a sense, with 1,000 people celebrating the best of the Northwest tech community, and obviously we put that on hold. So we'll be doing, I think, a number of these until this situation clears up, and we're very much looking forward to. I love Zoom. I love the virtual meetings, but I'm looking forward to having a cocktail with some of y'all and having some fun again. So, but yes, we can do more of them.
Okay.
Anything else coming in, Melanie?
Yep. What can employees do to support the leadership as they are adjusting or responding to the situation?
Oh. That's so kind. That's just so kind to even ask that question. I mean, I think asking your leaders exactly that is really fantastic.
Yeah, I think be gentle. And I think what I would say is just the fact that we don't have all the answers. And I think everybody's trying to do their best. And again, in the spirit of transparency, just having the dialogue and understanding that I don't know, maybe the comment right now.
All right. And another question is, how are you and other leaders at your company taking care of yourselves? So obviously someone out there really cares about the leaders, which is awesome.
I'm happy to take that.
Who cares about us, you know? I'll just jump in from that Shackleton episode that that I keep referencing and have loved. And, the great thing that Shackleton had by his side, he put forth a very confident, positive message to the team and was going forward, but he had a confidant that he had, because he was worried and concerned and had a lot of issues. And he had one confidant that he turned to for help. And I think that was good advice. Like if you have another person that can take some of that angst and pain away from you, that's helpful.
Yeah, I would say that in my role, I think a lot of times I naturally become that person for a lot of folks in the organization. So we're fortunate to be able to have lots of folks in our organization that can hold space like that for both our leaders and also for our employees, and how that translates for me as a leader within the organization of how I take care of myself, because that's that can be a role that can weigh you down very easily, is that I try to practice what I encourage other people to do, is make sure to check in with my counselor on a more regular basis than I normally do, with the people that I trust, and be able to have conversations with. So whether that's an informal counselor or coach, or whether that's a formal relationship that you have, we just recently launched at our company. It was not planned. It was kind of timely, but we launched a solution called Modern Health, which provides virtual e-counseling and coaching for employees. And it happened right when we were transitioning over to work from home. So it's been a really great resource for our employees who have felt the need to want to be able to access a resource that is independent of any of their teammates internally. So it just gives an additional option and resource, and it's been really well received. And we're really fortunate to be able to be in that position to be able to do that. But for folks who are on the call who may not have those same type of resources, I think it's really great to be able to refer resources that are more affordable and consumer driven, like Talkspace and crisis text line, and also like Headspace and other tools out there that are available for consumers to really help folks navigate and take care of themselves.
Nice.
Well, Melanie, any other questions coming through?
Not yet. I just sent a reminder. If you guys want to ask questions, please just use the chat feature located underneath whoever's speaking, which I'm assuming.
We should be able to upload them into the video conference here as well, so we can actually see you live. So hopefully we can give that a try.
We do have one more question. So I'm gonna promote them so you'll be able to see them.
Cool. Well, while you do that, the other thing it would be good to share is the poll results, if we've gotten enough response there on.
I'm sharing those now.
Yeah, so can everyone see the poll on the business impact from COVID-19? Can everyone take a look at those?
Yeah.
Got those? So 33% are very concerned, feel there's a detrimental impact. 50% are moderately concerned, still trying to assess the impact. 8% have little concern, only a temporary impact. 4% no concern of business as usual, and 4% optimistic positive impact on our business. So a lot of uncertainty seems from that, which makes operating a business tough. Markets don't like uncertainty, and businesses typically don't like uncertainty. So I think that's what we're seeing right there.
We have Taylor who has a question.
Oh, Taylor Soper from GeekWire.
Yep.
We'll see if we can. Oh,
right.
There he is.
Haven't showered yet.
Taylor.
Wait, not apologizing.
Yes.
I was wondering, and we've also asked some of the GeekWire 200 CEOs this for a post tomorrow, but what gives you hope? Like, is there anything positive? I know there's some new businesses, opportunities that are forming because of this situation, but does anything give you hope or optimism for the future? Just hoping to get maybe some positivity as we close this out.
And for those that don't know, Taylor Soper is GeekWire's managing editor. So any hope
I like that question
out there?
Yeah, I think there's tons of hope.
Mm-hmm.
I think, well, a couple things I'll say from my side. I love the fact that we are changing the opinion about telehealth. Obviously, I have a bias towards that given the business that we're in, but just the ability that we're going to be able to reach to people. Telehealth for behavioral health, mental health, like we were talking about, just the accessibility of some of this, I hope will change the world in a different sort of way than it has been in the past as we think about healthcare. And the other thing I'll just add is this community, you guys all on this, I mean, there's so many friends that are sort of in this group here that we're talking, just reaffirms my faith in where we live, who we are, how we're doing things. It's not easy right now, but I see so many moments of grace and beauty of how we're coming together.
I would agree with Britt on those points that you brought up too. I think the beauty of just being able to see community come together and take care of one another, I think it just is really heartening to see. I'm also really excited, not only just for telemedicine, but just the innovations that will come out of this cross different sectors and multidisciplinaries that will come out of this because of the different needs that have surfaced around the future work and what that looks like, and how you look at how we reevaluate also, I think, as a society, the value of what we have come to believe as low-wage workers and what that really means, and just really thinking about, I think, a lot of different things around healthcare, around education access and how it's delivered, and looking at healthcare as a whole, really reevaluating, I think, HIPAA, Britt, to your point, because the power of patient information in the hands of patients so that patients can make decisions for themselves, just like you do today with your finances, right? The access to your own financial livelihood so that you can make decisions, and what does that intersection look like when you start to move all those things together in a time where a lot of things are in flux. I think I just recently came across a doc that I can share. I'll pass it along so folks can take a look at it, but it shows, like, in moments of challenges like what we're facing right now, the biggest innovations in industries have come out during those times, and we tend to forget that happens. So I think I'm really hopeful, looking forward in terms of what's possible.
Yeah, I'll really, Kim, and I couldn't agree more. I think that kind of as almost a lifelong tech innovator wannabe / doer, I've kind of had this view for a long time that the potential for the tech that all these innovative people are building is greater than well actualized and seen yet. Partly because there's still pieces of it that need built, but partly there's an adoption issue. Like, people are just kind of generally tied to the have gone in the past and skeptical of innovation. And it's in moments like these where there aren't, the normal ways of doing things are, so we have to lean on new innovations. And lo and behold, some of these new innovations really well. Healthcare, I'm so glad you mentioned education. That's not going that well right now, but it's not because the tools don't exist. It's because we haven't done the social innovation around how do we put all the right tools into the hands of broad and kind of pull the playing. And I think that, when we get through this lesson learned, there's going to be tons of lessons learned from that will make our, ability to educate kids in the community far stronger, year to years from now. And the same thing on the healthcare front. We're obviously not in that business and even know the mechanics of it well. As a consumer, an observer, really see that this is an event that forced people into using and adopting forms that they might have been skeptical about earlier. And we're going to look back and say, yeah, that's pretty good. Like, now how can we set that up?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The only thing I would add, I just think whole new view on flexibility, and for people who were not accustomed to working, who had a bias against working from home, recognizing that real work is getting done, people are productive, and because maybe someone needs flexibility to drop off or pick up a kid or be home for some other reason, that doesn't mean that they can't be effective. There's also to pick on Taylor, but 2 weeks ago, Taylor would have never showed up on a conference call without having showered. But I think there's
Mikaela, yes, you would have.
Sorry, maybe there were 50 people on the call. I see it as a really healthy blurring of lines between the personal and professional. And I think when we're home, we realize all of these things that we have to do when we go out of the house, and sometimes especially for women of I have to do hair or do makeup or put on nice uncomfortable shoes, and now we're saying, oh, I don't have to do any of that stuff, right? And I can just sit here and save time and really comfortably do my job well. And so I think Kim or Britt, you said you were keeping a list of the new normal and all the things coming out of this. I just really hope that we hang on to some of the positive changes that we've experienced.
Hear, hear.
Yeah, this kind of leads into one of the questions, and one of our attendees, Anna Volbricht, wanted to ask this as well, which is, what does it look like coming out of this, and how do things change? And I think we're getting a little bit of a vision to what that might be, but what is your prognosis or your prediction on how does this change us? Do we move to more of a virtual world where we interact with folks, or do you think we're going to revert back to normal times rapidly?
I would venture to say that I think we will learn how to use technology more efficiently, and that we will have a better appreciation for human connection and relationships. And that's just the humanity kind of philosophy kind of part of it, is that I just think that there is a sense of the silver lining in it of, while everybody's really still moving fairly quickly, I'm still on calls all day long, that hasn't changed, but there is a certain also level of required slowing down of life, because we are in our houses and in our homes. Most of us are, and having to slow down a bit requires us to then take appreciation for relationships and people that we care for and care about. And so that human connectivity becomes forefront once again, I think, which it hasn't for quite some time. And then leveraging technology just to become more efficient so that you can create space for that. Because I think we've talked a lot about wanting to be able to do that and leverage technology in order to achieve that, but we haven't been forced to actually test that. And right now we're being forced to test that, which actually now coming out of it, I can see us being able to look at it and say, hey, you know what, this is what it's supposed to look like, right? This is what human connection relationships are supposed to look like in terms of how you leverage technology rather than being led by technology.
Yeah, anyone else on what this future looks like coming out of this?
Well, John, the only thing I'll say, and I've said this to a couple other people, is, and I don't mean to be doom and gloom, but we're not anywhere out of this. I think this will be waves and waves. And I think the good news is now we know how to be out of the office and how to be effective. And so it will, I think we've got an interesting 12 to 18 months ahead to actually figure out when we're in the office, when we're out of the office, what that means. So I wait to see. But I think we got a little time before we get back to any kind of normal.
I would add one thing. I was on a call earlier this morning with a group of working moms who are trying to figure out how to balance work and kids at home. And someone made a comment, which was that if you're a working parent, sometimes you miss milestones, and that suddenly, many parents are home seeing milestones for kids of all ages, really. I mean, I have teens, and my kids are typically so busy with, it's from school, and then they go to sports, and then they're at the gym at different times. Like, we've probably sat down, I've cooked more dinners, we've sat down for more dinners and played more board games in the past week than we have in probably the past 3 years combined. And it does remind me that some of that busyness, we bring it on ourselves, right? We have a choice. And I do think there's something to what Kim was saying, that, we've all seen what it looks and feels like to slow down a little bit. And there's some goodness in that, I think people might want to keep a piece of that even when they go back to work.
Yeah, absolutely. We got a couple other questions. Jennifer Garrett wanted to know, how do you see the government stimulus impacting your business and teams? I think it's a great question. I think there's a lot of confusion around that.
Yeah.
Has anyone
here with I don't know, but we're trying to figure it out, kind of almost in real time. I mean, it's taking shape right now. And don't know. Hopefully there's a piece of it to help.
Yeah, us too. We're starting to do some work for the Defense Health Agency and other things. It's early days. Right.
And then another question, Josh Trujillo, how are you replacing the social events and other team building activities within your company? We've talked about some of the virtual happy hours, the meetups with leadership. Anything else that is working?
Yeah, there's a group of folks who have Peloton rides every morning. So they've synced up all of their classes together. And so they're doing that together. There's a couple of folks who are also doing a shared yoga class together with an instructor. So there's a few different ways that folks are still connecting. We actually also have a group that enjoys knitting called Remitly. And so they'll all
oh, that's clever.
We like a good pun, yeah.
Yeah. Love it.
And they get together and we'll just pop open the laptop and sit together and do the same things that they would have done in the office together, with a glass of wine and whatever their project that they're working on to be able to stay connected. Yeah.
The most creative.
Mentioned, trying to find ways to show support for the community. We have a little group, the organic group called Flexe. It's a mouthful, but typically normal times we'll do a couple of events a year where we'll go all together. For this, they found an organization locally that could use some help and ran like an internal drive, and then the company and it was this remarkable thing where we're not a big company, we're not cash flow positive, so we don't have a lot of cash to put in, but we had budget, and so we put that forward. And the company matched us in like 32 minutes. From when it was just a fun way to sort of together and build community, but also kind of people shine.
Great. Go ahead, Britt.
Oh, no, I was just going to add, one of the other things that we've done with Zoom is we have kind of a virtual cribs. I don't know, we're going to have to think about how to share this going forward, but on some of our happy hours, people walk around their house. So we're getting to know people's families. We're getting to see their sauna. We're watching, some of them are making dinner while we're having happy hour. So there's a show here somewhere, Seattle Quarantine Cribs or something, that's been really interesting because we're getting different insight into people. how they live and who they are. So.
Yeah, very cool. Mikaela, anything?
There were so many good ones. I was just thinking of what I'd seen and heard from others. One was Rachel Coogan, who's now at Hiya, said that their team had played online Pictionary, which I thought was creative. And I can't remember who it was. Some of you probably saw the post, but one team that did pet happy hour. So everyone got on Zoom and brought their pets. And I just second what Britt's saying. I think I love getting to know people. Our Michelle, who some people know Michelle, she runs our operations. She shared a hilarious video of her new dog basically kicking her out of a chair, like as he was, shoving her out. And then the final picture was, she was off completely and the dog had taken over. But yeah, I think there's just more sharing. I was saying earlier today, there are more posts than ever on our random Slack channel. And, a lot of it's fun and it's good. And I think the fact that people are being forced to connect and forced to share some humor is just actually been really, really healthy and definitely something that we'll take forward.
Great. Well, I think we're coming to the end of time here. I think we got through most of the questions. Thanks everybody for joining us out there and for asking great questions. As we said, we'll probably be doing more of these in the future. And I wanted to give a big thanks to Mikaela, Britt, Karl, and Kim for joining us. And thanks to Melanie and Holly for helping to organize today. We're probably going to send a video recap of this out to everyone who's been on the conference call, and stay healthy and safe out there.
Nice. Thanks for hosting, John, Melanie.
Take care.
Much appreciated.
Bye.
Bye.
Mikaela, our second one together.
Bye.
Bye.